All right. Hello, everybody. I'm CheeseSlice. I'm here to present Left on Left for you guys today. I'm going to be the engineer and producer of the show as we record 2 segments today for the radio stations, Progressive Radio Network and WBAI. And today we have Gloria Guillo and Jayme Kuzmarov. Welcome, guys. All right. We're running a little bit late, so we should probably just jump right into it. You guys ready?
Yes. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Left on Left, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep from crying. I'm Gloria Guillo, filling in for Craig Pasta Jardula. I'm a former bureaucrat in New York City government, an investigative journalist, vice chair at WBAI Radio, and a co-founder of Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, a group so left, it's right on. I'm joined here today by a resident expert, Jayme Kuzmarov. Jayme is a professor at Tulsa Community College, a historian, investigative journalist, and managing editor of Covert Action Magazine, an online magazine that focuses on CIA and deep state activity. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are our own and not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. Our topic for today is the Pseudo-Left celebrates triumph of Al-Qaeda in Syria and fails to come to the defense of Tulsi Gabbard in the Face of Neo-McCarthyist Attacks. It's a mouthful. Take it away, Jayme. Please tell us what's going on.
Well, we
How
have
is the Syria civil war?
Jayme, go ahead with the clip.
Okay.
Democracy Now! You are overlooking the square where tens of thousands of Syrians have gathered for the first Friday prayers since the fall of Assad. Describe the scene for us.
There's a lot of firsts here. It's the first time they gather on Friday after Bashar al-Assad fled the country. It's the first time. Everyone seems to be very happy. I think that's the dominant sentiment, especially if people who are in the square. There's ecstasy, tens of thousands of people. They're still chanting down with Bashar al-Assad, but what's new is that it's also visible that the sentiment is they've been so far happy with the new rulers, not outpour. There is no criticism, loud criticism of the new rulers yet. So I'd say that the dominant thing is that everyone's happy down there.
Sarah Deeb, you recently wrote an AP article headlined "Thousands Scour Syria's Most Horrific Prison but Find No Sign of Their Loved Ones." On Tuesdays, families of disappeared prisoners continued searching Sednaya prison for signs of their long-lost loved ones who were locked up under Assad's brutal regime.
I will show you the photo of my missing brother. It's been 14 years. This is his photo. I don't know what he looks like if I find him. I don't know what he looks like because I am seeing the photos of prisoners getting out. They are like skeletons, but this is his photo. If anyone has seen him, can know anything about him, or can help us, he is one of thousands of prisoners who are missing. I am asking for everyone, not only my brother, uncle, cousin, and relatives.
Talk about this mad search by Syrians across the country.
Okay. So first question, Jayme. How is the Syrian civil war presented on Democracy Now? What is left out of all of this, and why is it biased? I just want to throw something in that, it's not one of the recorded questions. Wasn't al-Jawlani a Al-Qaeda operative? I mean, isn't this a big makeover?
Well, yeah, this may take me a lot of time to answer this question because there's so much wrong with this coverage. And firstly, Democracy Now! Is supposed to be alternative, independent media, for activists, counterweight to the mainstream media. However, their reporting is exactly the same as the mainstream media, triumphalistic about the triumph of these rebels. Discuss going into detail about the human rights abuses of the al-Assad government. Now, what's wrong about this portrayal is that, well, it's very, very narrow and one-sided. And as you point out, celebration, but, you have the triumph of Al-Qaeda. The head of state in Syria was in 2017 on the State Department's most wanted list as a wanted terrorist. And he was a member of Al-Qaeda in Iraq who was imprisoned at Abu Ghraib for 4 years and other U.S. military facilities for supporting the insurgency in Iraq. And these rebel forces that he led, the Al-Qaeda affiliate, Al-Nusra Front and others, committed horrific atrocities. So they're fixated on the atrocities of Bashar al-Assad. But, he was a target of U.S. regime change. These rebels that were supported by Turkey, by the United States, by Israel, they carried out suicide bombings and repeated massacres and ethnic cleansing. And currently, they're hunting down supporters of the Assad government. They're going house to house. Journalists have been, like Vanessa Beeley, who's a British journalist. She had to flee the country for her life, and she's a foreign journalist. We don't know what's going on as far as locals who supported the Assad government. And there may be ethnic cleansing operations targeting Shiite Alawite who supported Assad. Now, this was a vicious sectarian civil war, but Democracy Now!, like the mainstream media, is providing no larger context, how the U.S. helped to trigger this civil war. And conveniently, the current leader of Syria, al-Jawlani, was freed from Abu Ghraib in 2011, right at the time of the Arab Spring uprising, which he helped to lead. And this was an uprising. It was presented in the West for years. Democracy Now! Has been presenting the anti-Assad forces as these pro-democracy, pro-peace forces. In fact, it was led by Islamic extremists from the beginning, like al-Jawlani, who committed, and right away they were organized and carried out a military assault on the Syrian government, carrying out terrorist attacks. And there's evidence of black flag operations where foreign intelligence services who were behind this set up atrocities like in Ukraine and made it look like Syrian government forces were firing on the protesters when actually they were agents provocateurs and snipers doing that. And Assad had actually ordered restraint on the security forces. The exact same thing happened in Ukraine, and it was been studied in detail by Ivan Kachanovsky, a University of Ottawa professor who's being blacklisted now in Canada because of his pioneering research. But he exposed black flag operation in Ukraine, where they had these Georgian snipers and some American special forces coordinated killings that they blamed on the pro-Russian leader Yanukovych to stir up the crowd and turn public opinion against him, make like he this brutal tyrant. Now, in the Syrian case, yes, there were atrocities by the Assad government in a vicious civil war, but he faced a foreign coordinated uprising by jihadist elements. And what Goodman is leaving out, like the mainstream media, is this was a regime change operation coordinated by the United States with support from Israel, as well as Turkey, to overthrow Assad, who was an independent nationalist along the mold of Gaddafi, who had rejected overtures for this trans-Arabian pipeline that was supposed to go through Syria and allow for cheap transport of oil and natural gas to Europe. That's what the U.S. and West wanted. Assad rejected that and he favored a Russian-backed plan, and that's why he had to go. He was a target of regime change, and the neocons play the long game. Initially, their regime change operation failed, but with Russia diverted in Ukraine, they were able to carry it out now. And this is not something people on the left who are progressives, who are against empire, should be celebrating. It's been a cruel policy to ignite a civil war, to empower jihadists, and basically to break up Syria, because Syria may no longer be a stable country under its current leadership. Israel's already moved in and expanded its occupation of the Golan Heights, and they bombed Syria hundreds of times since Assad's fall on December 8th, because they want to take more territory. And as Jolani is not, Assad stood up to the Israelis. Jolani is not. And that's another reason the U.S. is supporting this. Just
take a breath for a second.
Expansion. Let me just finish. Allow for the expansion of the project of Greater Israel. And that's what the U.S. wants, because they want Israel to be a dominant power, to be able to take out Iran. And so the U.S. could dominate the Middle East and put in the pipeline where they want it. Sorry, I was going a long time, but there's a lot to cover.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I just want to highlight some key facts that are just, wasn't there like a $10 million bounty on al-Jolani?
Yeah, and there was no reporting on this on Democracy Now! This is complete deception of her audience, and the left should be out protesting. These anti-genocide protesters were all protesting the Israeli assault on Gaza, but I don't see an upsurge in protests about this, and that Al-Qaeda has taken over the country. And I mean, they've been raping Syria for the last 13 years, stealing the oil. And that's really the plan, is to steal their natural resources. And there had been a horrific humanitarian crisis resulting from the civil war that was engineered by outsiders. And it was combined with draconian sanctions that were imposed over the last decade, combined with the upsurge in violence. These sanctions deprive Syrians of vital medicines and needed material. And it's created a biblical type catastrophe in the country, similar to Yemen. And it's equivalent to medieval type siege. And I don't see anybody out protesting this. It's as cruel as the policy in Gaza. And the Syrians have suffered. And that's why they couldn't. For years, Syrians rallied. The polls showed that the majority of Syrians supported Assad for all his problems. They supported him because he was an authentic nationalistic Syrian leader who adopted economic policies to benefit the Syrian population. But in the face of these sanctions and years of warfare, and this is a strategy the U.S. used in Nicaragua, they basically want to starve the population and turn them, years of terrorist attack in Nicaragua, like Syria. The population is tired and they're ravaged, so they don't have the wherewithal to stand up to defend Assad as they did and defend their country's sovereignty. This is really an issue of national sovereignty, but Goodman makes it all about human rights, but she paints in a very one-sided way that only Assad committed human rights abuses, when these rebels committed some of the most horrific atrocities and documented massacres that she doesn't cover at all. And that's similar to the Wall Street Journal, because I did a survey of all the media, New York Times, they don't cover it. It's a complete whitewash, and it's a very deceptive reporting.
Just to bring this down home, aren't they referred to as head choppers?
Yes.
I mean, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about ISIS, which is a CIA organized thing. We're talking about Al-Qaeda, which is a CIA organized thing. Go through the history of the CIA with all of this jihadist stuff a little bit.
Yes, well, the CIA has preferred, and this fits a pattern of U.S. foreign policy going back to the Cold War, and I can recommend that listeners read the book Devil's Game by Robert Dreyfus, how the U.S. helped to unleash fundamentalist Islam. And he starts his book in the 1950s, and the U.S. power elite made a decision that they preferred Islamic fundamentalists over secular nationalistic leaders like Gamal Abdel Nasser was the major bête noire in those days. He was the leader in Egypt. and he wanted to forge a pan-Arabic union, unify the Arab countries, and adopt socialistic economic policies to nationalize the oil, and so the Arabs would take control over their own oil. And that's what the Western Empire did not want. And they preferred Islamic fundamentalists who promoted capitalistic economic programs. And in Egypt, they supported the Muslim Brotherhood against Nasser. And, in Afghanistan in the 80s, they supported the Mujahideen to overthrow the socialist government in Afghanistan. And in many countries, in Libya, the Obama administration supported jihadists to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi, who was a secular nationalist who had nationalized Libya's oil industry. And that's the pattern in Syria. In the 80s, under Hafez al-Assad, Bashar's father, the CIA and U.S. supported an Islamic uprising that Hafez put down very brutally in the early 80s, and that replicated what happened in 2011. So there is, it fits a historical pattern that the U.S. allies with Islamic fundamentalists as a counterweight to nationalistic leaders like Assad or Gaddafi who want to control their country's economic resources and want to strengthen the Arab world vis-a-vis the West. And there's a war against them. And this has been a major coup and success for Western imperialists. And that's why anti-imperialists should not celebrate this like Amy Goodman wants us to.
So let me just break in. So there's a pattern here, right? Okay. If a leader is nationalistic and supports keeping the resources of their country to the people in their country, then they are targeted by the United States, and the CIA uses its resources to overthrow their government, uses its resources to push for hideous sanctions, which undermine whatever leadership is there, and then arm and train revolutionary groups to go in and destroy a functional country and a functional government. And this is a pattern that we've seen in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. This is just another one. This is part of the, what is it, like 7 in 5 years that Wesley Clark talks about? It's another one. This was a target back before 2000 and I guess back to 2001, right? 2001. So
yes, and if I can say, I agree with your assessment is right on the mark. And they use human rights to gain the support as part of a propaganda war against that leader. They play up his human rights abuses, real or imagined. They did this with Gaddafi. They sped rumor that he was even giving Viagra to his soldiers to carry out mass rapes, which was false. They blamed him for decades on terrorist attacks, that there was no evidence he was behind those attacks. So the same thing with Assad, and that's the way they capture the hearts of Western liberals and prevent an anti-war movement and opposition by playing up the alleged human rights abuses and making like this revolt is actually for against this brutal tyrant and bring democracy, but really it's not. It's these brutal fundamentalist elements who are overthrowing a nationalistic leader.
The other curious thing I say, okay, in these broadcasts is that there's this concept of win and lose, and who won and who lost. And Alex Craner, who I've been kind of following, who's like a financial advisor and also does a lot on geopolitics, had written a really good article. There are some things that I found that I had some issues with. He believed that there were somehow 270,000 troops and that they just kind of laid down their weapons. And when I did some further research, I found that there were only about 70 to 100,000 still remaining. So that was one thing. But his conclusion, which I agreed with totally, is that what's happened in Syria and what's happened in Libya, Afghanistan, and Iraq is not a long-term win. These countries are devastated and the people are devastated and there's tremendous, losses. So what is the win? It's a short-term win. Well, who benefits from this short-term win? And, what I'm seeing here is that this short-term win, as like you're saying, Jeremy, it always goes to somehow the oil and gas industry, the bankers. And when we look at this, this pipeline that was being worked on, which would have been connecting Iran's South Pars field, the largest in the world, to Syria and then to the Mediterranean and Europe. And that was really one of the main goals, was to disrupt that. So I find that, that's always kind of the root. So when we kind of look at this stuff and we look at the long-term goal and the short-term goal, the short-term win seems to always be the oil companies. And, when I did some research on Iraq, I found out, which key oil companies benefited: ExxonMobil, BP, Royal Dutch Shell, Total Energy, and oddly, China, CNPC, and also Lukoil benefited from, which is Russian through the invasion in Iraq. So yeah, there is a win. But what's really shocking and surprising and horrible is that we, as a people, are so propagandized that we see this win, this short-term win that only benefits a predator class and a very small portion of the predator class. But we are so propagandized that we celebrate this as our own victory, at least initially. Eventually, the dust settles and we see that there's 500,000 Iraqi children killed, and through sanctions, we see all the other stuff. We see the slave trades going on in Libya. We see all kinds of horrible stuff that happens after this. But so it's really quite alarming how propagandized we are, and it's also quite alarming on how shows such as Democracy Now! just keep repeating this message, about these head choppers. I mean, and these terrorists as being a success. Thank you.
Well, it's a success because Syria was a route between Iran and Hezbollah. So the Israelis are very, very happy because they've cut off that supply line from Iran to Hezbollah. And now they have a further base. They're expanding their control in Syria. They're expanding, and they're going beyond the demilitarized zone in a complete violation of international law, expanding basically an Israeli land grab. So, and they've carried out a lot of bombing. And I think we see how Israel's used as a proxy of the United States. And that's why Israel the U.S. continued to supply Israel with copious arms because Israel is doing a lot of dirty work. They really did a lot of the work in getting rid of Assad, and that was a project. Yeah, as you pointed out, going back 20 years, that was a key goal of the neoconservatives to remove Assad. We see that U.S.-Israeli alliance, but there's a complete disregard for human life here. I mean, the Syrian population has suffered so horrendously, and I was really disturbed by the media account, including there was an article I read in the Wall Street Journal where he was just like gushing about how this has struck a hammer blow at Iran, and Iranian power is now compromised, and Israel, this was the kind of thing that he was writing about in the Wall Street Journal, and there was no regard at all for the lives of Syrians. There are at least 300,000 killed in the Syrian civil war, millions displaced. Many are living on the brink of starvation. Many children don't have adequate nutrition. Their brains are not being developed properly because of that. And I think 90% don't have enough food. So we can't imagine what life is like in Syria. We sit here comfortably, enjoying our lives and free time. And these people are gloating when they just made a wasteland and ruined the lives of millions of people. And they're gushing because now, Iran doesn't have a supply route to Hezbollah. But I mean, Hezbollah was a creation of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1992, where they laid waste to a good part of Lebanon. And I mean, a lot of these groups that are fighting against Israel is because of a lot of Israeli policy and injustice meted out to groups like the Palestinians. So I mean, they don't want to solve the conflict or problem or reach some kind of agreement. Instead, they just want to kill, and destroy people's lives and rule by brute force. And I mean, it's right at the playbook of Genghis Khan. So I mean, we're not much evolved, I don't think, from the era of Genghis Khan. And these neoconservatives who run our society and control our media just want to advance this caveman mentality. And it's sad that they're really effective in brainwashing and conditioning Western liberals to go along with their imperial and murderous project by playing up the human rights of Assad or Gaddafi. And that's how they do it.
Just a number for people. In Iraq's post-war oil revenues, after 2019, they were exceeding $80 billion annually during peak years. So there's a lot of money to be made with these pipelines and with this control of the oil. So
and Donald Trump said, if I can interrupt you, Donald Trump was honest, and he said we're there to steal their oil. He said that. So I mean, all these deaths just for oil. At one point, will humanity stand up and say, no, we're better than that as a species? We're not just going to kill our fellow human beings so a few oil men could grow richer, and so we don't have to develop alternative energy sources or high-speed rail. I mean, there are alternatives to our dependence on fossil fuels.
Well, that wraps up our show for today. This is Left on Left. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like, donate, and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week.
All right, that was great. You guys want to
just
jump
the ending?
Yeah, we still didn't get to the Tulsi Gabbard, and
we'll throw it in the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, that might be relevant too.
It's a big topic, Jeremy.
Very big. All right, you guys ready for the next part?
Tulsi Gabbard, and then we'll get with the stuff on Biden, this corporate America and stuff.
All right.
Okay.
You take it away when you're ready.
Okay. Hey everyone, welcome to Left on Left, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep from crying. I'm Gloria Guillo, filling in for Craig Pasta-Jardula. I'm a former bureaucrat in New York City government, an investigative journalist, vice chair at WBAI Radio, and a co-founder of Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, a group so left it's right on. I'm joined here today by a resident expert, Jayme Kuzmarov. Jayme is a professor at Tulsa Community College, a historian, investigative journalist, and managing editor of Covert Action Magazine, an online magazine that focuses on CIA and deep state activity. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are our own and not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. Our topic today is really focused on the defense of Tulsi Gabbard in the face of neo-McCarthyist attacks. Take it away, Jayme.
Okay, well, Tulsi Gabbard was nominated by Trump as the director of national intelligence, and generally Trump has appointed a lot of hawkish people, but Gabbard is more on the dovish side, and she spoke at a rally against the Ukraine war, and she warned about the threat of nuclear war, and she also discussed the perils of NATO expansion and kind of challenged the myth of a Russian unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. And she was also, wanting, she met with Bashar al-Assad, the former Syrian president, and was trying to negotiate, a peace agreement or get the ball rolling for some peace. And, between, and ending the U.S. support for jihadist terrorists in Syria as part of regime change operation. And she was mercilessly attacked at the 2020 Democratic primary. She was the lone candidate to, support peace and to question the new Cold War and the U.S. policy in Syria. And people like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris attacked her as a Russian agent and Assad lover right out of the McCarthy era. And now, since she's been appointed director of national intelligence, they're at it again. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the former head of the DNC, called her a Russian asset. And these national security advisors, pretty high-level people, wrote a letter expressing concern at Gabbard's appointment and saying, well, they spread all kinds of misinformation about her. They said that, again, that she was an Assad lover and apologist, and that she promoted conspiracy theories. And these alleged conspiracy theories included the claim that her refuting that Assad had used chemical weapons against the Syrian population. However, this has been studied by some top scientists in the United States, including notably Theodore Postel, an MIT scientist who is an advisor to the Naval Chief of Operations and worked in the Pentagon and is a top weapons expert. And he did a very sophisticated computer study of alleged chemical gas attacks in Khan Sheikhoun, and he found that it was impossible that the Syrian government could have carried them out, that it would have to have been carried out by rebels if it was carried out. But he found tampering with the scene of the alleged gas attacks. He found dead animals were placed there that looked like they had been moved to that position. And he had there were photos of workers who were working at the scene who he said would have immediately been killed if they had any exposure to sarin gas. And he said also sarin gas attacks don't normally create crater. There was a crater. So there's all kinds of scientific evidence that disprove this claim that Assad carried out an attack, and even that there was an attack in Khan Sheikhoun. And there have been other studies, including by Seymour Hersh, the maverick investigative journalist, to disprove other claim, in other instances where Assad was accused of these chemical gas attacks. And you have members of the UN Commission to investigate chemical warfare. Whistleblowers came out to say that the UN actually created a phony report and suppressed all this information that would have cast doubt or disproven the idea that Assad carried out these chemical attacks. And those chemical attack was used as part of a propaganda war to justify escalated bombing of Syria and support for the CIA's Operation Timber Sycamore, the funding of jihadist terrorists trying to overthrow the Assad government. So Gabbard was not promoting any conspiracy theory. She actually met with Theodore Postel, and she's a rare politician who was actually searching for the truth and met for this top scientific expert who published his findings in some prestigious scientific journals. And this attack on Gabbard referred to Elliot Higgins as an authority.
One thing, let me get a word in here. I just want to say one thing that really needs to be emphasized. While Tulsi Gabbard is being called a Russian asset, she's a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, and she was on active duty during her campaign for president. So, I mean, here you have Hillary Clinton and, Kamala Harris attacking Tulsi Gabbard, who is in the military, and calling her a Russian asset. I mean, that is so ridiculous and so horrid. I mean, to actually do that. And I believe she tried to, to get them for slander and stuff like that. And I don't think that went through. But I mean, it's really appalling when, our military is insulted by politicians. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, these are baseless accusations. My point, and in this letter, I mean, I agree with you there. And this letter they issued, they referred as an authority. They actually, I think, repeated. They tried to attack Theodore Postel as a Kremlin misinformation agent when he's this distinguished MIT scientist who does very objective assessments based on his scientific expertise in many different areas. And he's a very, very impressive guy with very high integrity. And to start calling him...
He's a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
He's a rocket scientist.
Smarter than these people. And, they refer to as an authority, this guy named Elliot Higgins, who works for Bellingcat, which is funded by the National Endowment for Democracy and advances anti-Russian propaganda and propaganda against any government targeted for regime change. And Postel, I interviewed him, and he said Higgins was a complete crackpot, and actually who knows nothing about science. And Higgins confirmed this. He gave an interview in 2015, and he says he knows no more about science than your average Xbox player. And actually, Higgins never even graduated from college. MIT Postal has a PhD, I believe, either from MIT or one of the top scientific institutions, and has taught for years, has published hundreds of peer-reviewed articles in top scientific journals. And Elliot Higgins didn't even graduate college, and his degree was not even in science. And he said he knows no more than an average Xbox player, and they're citing him as an authority and basis for calling Tulsi Gabbard a conspiracy theorist. I mean, how much will people put up with this garbage? And, the other thing they claimed in the letter was that Gabbard promoted conspiracies about biolabs in Ukraine. But Victoria Nuland testified before the U.S. Senate that the U.S. had what she called biological research facilities. And Gabbard was calling for an inquiry into what exactly goes on with these facilities. And that's exactly what a responsible political figure should be doing. So this letter just has no merit at all. And, it shows how venal the U.S. foreign policy and political elite are. And it's right out of the playbook of Joseph McCarthy, because I did a column and I had a cartoon in it, and it had McCarthy with, on one hand, a picture, a doctored photo, and, false accusation. And that's what happened in the McCarthy era. So, and that's a shameful era. It's known as a shameful era in American history. It's taught to students that way, but it's going on today. And when will people stand up against this? And sadly, people on the left are not standing up for Gabbard and speaking out against this. Like, I didn't see any segments on Democracy Now! About this, or trying to defend Gabbard or call out these people who are attacking her viciously. So the left, we've got to mobilize against this new McCarthyism. And it's not just the Trump. Everything is placed on partisan lines. Like, Ellen Schrecker wrote this great book on Many Are the Crimes on McCarthyism. And she was part of the Historian Against the War group that I was part of at one point. And they have this campaign against the new McCarthyism, but it's only focused on conservatives and how they're suppressing LGBTQ books or something. They're not speaking out on this Russophobia and the huge McCarthyism that's going on against any attacks on anyone who question the dominant narratives of U.S. foreign policy. They're the real victims today of McCarthyism, and there are purges going on in higher education. And historians of McCarthyism like Schrecker are not pointing out those parallels.
Yeah, it's true. If you're only giving the Republican narrative, you're okay, and you're not shadow banned. If you're only giving the Democratic narrative, you're okay, and you're not shadow banned. And shows such as Democracy Now! Really are pretending to give a left perspective, but in reality, they are doing the Democratic narrative. But the worst thing, and Jayme has brought this up, is that the Democrats and the Republicans have the same head. It's just the left and right side of your body. It's your left hand or your right hand, or your left foot or your right foot, but the head is the same. So what is, really awful here is that, you might say, okay, well, it's the Republicans. They put Tulsi Gabbard in there, and that's what the problem is. But the left is so infiltrated, and that it just recites that same narrative, even though it's supposed to have a different perspective. So I think
the left should stand up for civil liberties and for integrity in government, and that's what's at stake here. Yeah, this is not really a left-right issue. I mean, Gabbard was a Democrat. She left the party because they viciously attacked her when she was promoting peace. And historically, there were elements in the Democratic Party that we discussed on the show, like Jordan McGovern. I mean, her worldview is more, similar to that of a Jordan McGovern or a Frank Church when it comes to foreign policy issues. And those kind of people once did have a place in the Democratic Party, but they just viciously treated her, so she left. I don't think she's that ideological. So it's not really a left-right issue. It's an issue of integrity, and that you have these foreign policy elites attacking her based on false accusation. That's the problem. And I don't personally agree with everything Gabbard says or entire outlook about foreign policy. She has a very strong anti-Islamic position. She wants to, I think one reason she was against the policy in Syria, which does make sense, is that she felt the war on terror had been compromised because the U.S. Was supporting jihadist elements in Syria and Libya. So I agree with her in that. I don't personally agree that the U.S. should fight a war on terror. She may disagree with me. But the issue is here, people can have political disagreements, but I don't like to see somebody attacked based on false accusations. To me, that's what's at stake here. They're attacking her based on false accusations, and she did stand for peace when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, and Syria. So that is very honorable. So it makes it even worse. They're false accusations against somebody who wanted a better foreign policy and wanted peace. And it's sad to see the left abandon her.
Well, the other thing is, I really respect Tulsi Gabbard, and I had worked on her campaign for president and met her, and it was really an amazing experience because she's really a very strong human being and very centered, and it was quite good to meet her. What I'm finding, a problem with her position is that she does describe what's wrong with this, Islamic terrorism and things of that nature, but she doesn't go ever to the root of it. She doesn't go to the history of the CIA's involvement in developing this. She always starts at a certain point where it exists. She doesn't really ever go into how it exists or why it exists or the history of how it exists. So I think that's
the other facet
really important.
Is that she doesn't address the economic imperialism. And I think that's true of a lot of even some critics of U.S. foreign policy. They don't want to get to the root of it as an economic imperialism. And there are a lot of the bad, a lot of the time, things are spotlighted on the hot spot. The war is going on, whether Israel, Gaza, or Ukraine. But I mean, the U.S. economic imperialism is prevalent all around the world every day. And the left should, spotlight the huge global inequalities that result. And often, ultimately, that does lead to conflict because you have leaders like Assad or Gaddafi in the Middle East or Chavez in Latin America that come in and want to reclaim economic sovereignty of their country. And then they're targeted for, propaganda offensives and regime change. So, but I mean, flaws aside, again, I'll stand up for anybody who is. I don't like to see people falsely accused and bullied like she has been. And also, she has supported, peaceful overtures and a peace-oriented foreign policy. So that's a good starting point for me.
Well, we always see peace activists marginalized and and tortured. And our last show was on John Lennon and how it's believed that he was murdered because he is a peace activist. And that is something that we've seen with, Dr. Martin Luther King and many others who, go on the side of peace. One of the things you wanted to talk about, I'm not sure if we're going to talk about it today or if we're going to push it out to next week, but you wanted to talk about how Biden is boasting of his service to corporate America and why the fake left Democrats express willingness to work with Trump and the GOP in slashing government social programs. Did you want to talk about that, or we want to stay on?
In the last 10 minutes, we can cover this. Yeah, because Biden, now that he doesn't have to run for any more elections, he's more candid. And we kind of saw this with Obama. After he left office, he gave a speech to Goldman Sachs, and he said, "You should be kissing my feet. I made you so much money." So, I mean, they show their true color. Biden gave a speech and basically said, "I love corporate America, and the rich, should be able to make as much money as they want." And I mean, his administration, capped the tax rate. He refused to raise taxes on billionaires and the wealthy. And I read an article that said that billionaires are taxed now only 8% of their income. and you and I pay a lot more in taxes than that. So I mean, Biden is really a conservative. We see how the political system has shifted entirely to the right. We have two right-wing parties, one extreme right-wing party. I mean, Trump in his first presidency, he made it easier for billionaires and large corporate to offshore their money, and he cut the corporate tax rate considerably. Biden raised the corporate tax rate slightly, but capped taxes on and refused to raise taxes on billionaires, and really refused to adopt any strong legislation to force billionaires to pay their taxes and to force them not to be able to evade their money and offshore their money. So it just goes to show again that we have two right-wing parties, and Biden's pretty open about it. And he said, I come from the state of Delaware in this speech, and Delaware, the top place for corporations, and a lot of corporations go there because they have almost no taxes. So corporations historically moved to Delaware, and that's where he comes out of. So, favoring corporations, and he favored the MBNA. He had a particularly close relationship with the credit card companies and the MBNA bank, and he gave Hunter a nice job there after he graduated from college. So he'd been doing favors for corporations. So, and it's ridiculous that Trump would attack him as a Marxist. It just shows how screwed up our political system is. And anybody on the left who attaches themselves to the Democratic Party, then they're not really left. It's really a conservative party, and its foreign policy is more hawkish than Republicans. So it's a neoconservative policy, and the Republican Party are now adopting kind of techniques of European fascists when they're scapegoating minority groups and immigrants, and they want to turn working class people against immigrants instead of forging a movement against the oligarchy. So we're in a very bad place, but I think our goal is to try and help develop an independent left, to get people to see that there's no hope in the Democratic Party. We need to organize independently and not support the corporate Democrats like Biden, as he's openly said that he is a pro-corporation Democrat. So those of us who care about, and we know corporations are inhumane institutions that only care about profits. It relates to what we're discussing with Syria. They'll kill as many Syrians as necessary to steal their oil. Those of us who are decent human beings shouldn't embrace that ethos and a system dominated by these inhuman corporations. And that's why we call ourselves leftists and want to form an independent movement for a more decent society, not dominated by corporations and endless war.
Jeremy, I'd just like to add some numbers so we can get this across to our audience. You're saying that Biden's gift to the billionaires is an 8% tax rate, right?
Yes.
When we look at what the middle class is paying, it's between 20 and 30% of their income. So this is not even a favor to the middle class, not even talking about, more of the working or impoverished, but just the middle class alone is paying 2 to 3 times more than the wealthy. So that is really chilling.
Yes, it's blatantly unfair, and that's why we need independent political movements and parties, because the two parties are not working for the American public. They're working for the billionaire class, a predatory class. And you can compare it with the New Deal, how far we've slid. In that in the New Deal, Roosevelt imposed a 90% tax rate above your first million, and Eisenhower preserved that system. So millionaires had to pay 90% after their first million, and that existed through the Eisenhower administration. Actually, Kennedy started to lower the tax rate for the wealthy. There are a lot of illusions about Kennedy, and we can have another show about that. And that's when the corporate tax rate started to come down. Reagan put it down immeasurably. But I mean, this generation of corporate Democrats, Bill Clinton tilted the Democratic Party totally in the camp of big corporation with the decline of organized labor. And we see that playing out in the Obama-Biden years. And that's why we need to organize a new left in the country for the middle and working class people.
True. So you had also wanted to talk, let's see. about. I lost my note.
Yeah, we just have 2 minutes, so I can
Oh, okay.
address. There was another article. Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
again, this is the point. The Democratic Party is not for us.
I think you
because-
wanted to talk about Bernie Sanders.
Well, yeah, they're going along with Trump. You know, Trump has set up this cost-cutting agents. Well, I guess it's just an advisory board at this point with Elon Musk, this Vivek Ramaswamy, and they want to cut $2 trillion out of the federal government. And I agree. I mean, yeah, there is some waste in the government, but they're using this notion of cost-cutting to slash core New Deal program and Great Society program, to cut Medicare, to cut Social Security. And this has long been a dream of the conservatives going back to the New Deal era. And Democrats are just going along. We don't see a pushback. Even Bernie Sanders said he's going to work with, that group that wanted to slash the government. So, again, we need an independent movement that will fight against Trump's agenda, which seemed to be the agenda as well of a large portion of the Democratic Party that is beholden to large corporations. And that is going to gut the New Deal. The New Deal brought in more social democracy. It created a bit more of a level playing field and expanded the American middle class. And that's really eroding under these conservative economic programs. And the Democrats, again, are going along with that. And that's a big problem. And that's why we need an independent left to fight back.
Thank you. Well, I guess that wraps up our show for today. Wait. Yeah, we have 2 minutes left. Oops, not yet. We're not going to wrap yet. We've got 40 seconds. Okay.
Well, if you want to put 2 and 2 together, yeah, what Biden said about is, again, he's admitting that he's, supports corporations and supports the wealthy. And look at the hellscapes they've created, like in Syria, across the Middle East, and decent human beings, can't tolerate that.
Okay, well, that wraps up our show for today. This is Left on Left. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like, donate, and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Bye.
Okay, that's good. We can wrap it up. So
Got a little ambitious there. Sorry.
now I know you were trying to get ahead of the clock there a little
we got
bit.
everything in, so that's good.
No, yeah, you did. It's very good. Very good.
Okay, that was a good show.
Yeah, it was passionate, Jayme. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I was getting
You got revved up. You got revved up.
Yeah, you really wrapped it up because you shoehorned that Tulsi Gabbard thing into the second segment and then got everything done in the second segment. So
yeah.
Good job.
Good. Okay, well, we'll have to think about what we want to do for next week. Actually, on the 30th, I have a report card on Joe Biden's foreign policy, so that'll be good for that week. But I guess we'll have 1 week before that, so you can think about what you want to do.
Let's see, next
And
week.
if you have some ideas, Gloria, you can suggest it. Maybe we do some more on Syria, one segment, and this Jolani we didn't go into. Like how he may have, they conveniently got him out of prison right in time for the Syrian revolution. And that can't be a coincidence. They obviously did something. They recruited him when he was in prison and tortured him.
5 years, right? He was in Abu Ghraib for 5 years.
Yeah, and different. Well, I don't know if he was in Abu Ghraib the whole time. He was in Abu Ghraib and Camp Bucca, different prisons.
Oh, yeah, there were different camps. There were
5 years.
Yeah.
And then he was conveniently released on the eve of the Arab Spring Syrian
and then
protest.
bankrolled.
Yeah. So we can probably do another segment on Syria next time.
The other thing you brought up was this other article on how like MK Ultra people are. And one thing that was really interesting, one of the people in one of the groups that I belong to was talking about how they bombed the passport office, immigration and nationalization office in Syria. And that really goes to your article. If you knock out all of Syria's ability to track people and to know who's who, that enables all kinds of infiltration.
Yeah.
I thought that was, pretty interesting.
It's bad. I don't think this Syria story is over.
No,
I think we've got a lot there.
Oh, this is, basically.
Well, I got to run, guys, because
All right, we'll wrap it up.
Good job, Gloria. Yeah, sorry if
You
I was
too,
a
thanks.
little. Well, maybe
No, it was good. I like
fired
when
up
you get.
this morning.
I like when you like had enough and you just go.
Yeah, it's just like I'm tired of this lies, and with the Gabbard. I mean, I don't mind debating some of her position, but just these false accusations, it just gets to me.
Yeah,
Me
it's
too.
really bad. Like,
Yeah.
I volunteered for her in 2020 as well.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And and then after the
Anyway, I have to run
campaign,
because I've
All
got
right.
that's
Okay.
yeah. All right,
All
talk
right.
to you guys
Bye,
soon. You
Jeremy.
guys
see you,
continue.
Jeremy.
Thanks a
I
lot,
actually
Jamie,
have to.
again, for your
I
help.
actually have to go.
Yeah, we're
to,
having a meeting, Jamie, on Wednesday. We're trying to do some fundraising, and now that
I
we-
mentioned it to him. I mentioned it to
Oh
him.
yeah, Wednesday's going to be tough for me because that's when they're releasing my dad from the hospital.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm
Well,
going
we'll
to
keep
probably
you posted on what we're doing.
I'm going to
yeah.
be there picking him up. So
Okay.
he's coming
Okay.
home.
Good.
All right. Good.
Okay.
Good. All
See you
right.
guys
Bye.
soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Jeremy.
Okay.
So I'll just finish that thought though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I volunteered for Tulsi, and then after the campaign, then she came out, and then her rhetoric changed a little bit, especially when it came to Islamist fundamentalists, and it's just that stuff did not sit well with me at all. And I don't even really agree with everything she has to say on when it comes to the border, but I'm not like I'm not in total disagreement with her, but some of the things she had to say there, they were talking points right out of Fox News that I just absolutely disagree with. So, it's kind of like, well, you have to take a step back, and I can't, I supported this person, I got to take the L there because now she's doing this and I don't like all that. But she's still better than like most of the people in Washington.
She's a peace activist, and she's been on the front lines. She knows, firsthand what war really means for our servicemen and women.
She's not a pacifist by any means, but she's also not. She tends to lean into the rhetoric of we should not be using our army for offensive purposes, which is what we're always doing. And so she's against that, but she's certainly not against us doing what we need to do to defend our interests.
Yes.
But having a base in Syria for what has it been like 8 years now, and we've been illegally occupying Syria. I guess it doesn't matter now because our side has won and they've taken over. They've destroyed the sovereignty of Syria, and now you're going to have corporate takeover in most of all of the areas of Syria, and they're probably going to carve it up, give some parts of Syria to one group and another, and we can go into all that later. But
yeah, but the tragic
really
part is our side never wins. The working people, the middle class, and the impoverished, whether you're in Syria, whether you're in the United States, whether you're in England, we never win. The oligarch and the predator class always win.
Yeah, and that's where. That's another part of this that really bugs me is 2 years ago when Russia was invaded Ukraine, or was it 3 years ago? They were saying this is wrong. You should not be able to, you're infringing on the rights of a sovereign country. But that's exactly what our side's doing right here in Syria. And the same people that were condemning it, which is not even exactly what Russia was doing. They were condemning that idea, and now they're celebrating it because it's happening in our favor. But when it was against us, it was the horrible, worst thing in the world.
Well, when you're propagandized to believe that what the predator class is doing is in your best interest, because that's the only news you're getting. That's what every TV show has. That's what everything out of Hollywood says.
All the corporate media.
When you're that propagandized, even video games. We are so propagandized. So we're actually celebrating things that are against us.
Yeah, that are really bad for us.
Inflation. We're celebrating the decline of the dollar. We're
celebrating taking away at the things services that are out there. What little we have left of the New Deal. Like Jeremy's saying, they're going to gut the New Deal. Well, they've already been gutting the New Deal for the last 50 years. They're going to gut what's left of it. I mean, so it's just going to be like the Biden regime has been very much filled with austerity. And now it's going to be even more so coming up here because they're going to try to cut whatever wasn't cut. They would pay lip service to it, but they never did it. And I mean, it's like, it's the kind of thing that the propaganda in our country. So it's so maddening sometimes. Like when you watch, like I have to listen to Fox News a lot now because I'm living at my parents' house for time being. And they keep bringing up, oh, defund the police is a terrible thing. And I'm like, but where did they do it? All I saw them was increased funding for the police everywhere and crime has gone up. Where did they actually defund the police? Except for maybe a few small towns across America. I think there's like one or two. But the rest of the country, they've increased funding for the police departments. And then they say all this crime happens. And it's like, well, this is what happens when you defund the police. But they didn't defund the police. They gave the police more money and more money and more money. And the stuff is that you're complaining about happening is happening. So and that kind of stuff just, I can't listen to it and not yell at the TV. And my mom's like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, they're just lying to you. It's like, okay, I agree. I mean, the defund the police thing is what broke it up. Right.
But when you tell the truth, you are shadow banned. One of the things I did was I put my name in ChatGPT and I asked, why am I shadow banned? And it told me, it told me in no uncertain terms why I am shadow banned.
Because you're activist and you're against a dissident.
I've written on topics that it doesn't want you to write on. I've written on sanctions. I've written on peace. I've written on election fraud. So these things we're not allowed to write on. Not that there's anything negative. These are all truths, but we're not allowed to convey truths. That's
all the things that
do that. We're shadow banned.
Doing all the work that journalists are supposed to do is going to get you shut down in this country. Like journalism is supposed to be a watchdog on power, but if you are trying to be a watchdog on power, they will crush you and shun you and try to non-person you. And the only journalism we get, quote unquote journalism, is people who are guard dogs for power.
Yes, exactly.
That's why
so like this show, send money.
Yeah, well,
share this show.
I mean, speaking of shadow ban, you're watching the shadow ban show right now. But like once you get into the shadow ban network, you kind of find all the shows in shadow ban. Yeah. But that's because you're probably shadow banned yourself if you're watching the show.
Put your name in ChatGPT and find out why nobody knows what you're saying or doing, and you'll find out. It'll tell you. It'll tell you what.
I mean, we're laughing because if we weren't laughing, we'd be crying.
We'd be crying. Yeah.
Right. That's the whole point of the show.
All right. Thanks, Jayme. I got to run too.
Yeah, I do too.
Bye, everybody.
This has been a busy Monday for me. And, next week is Christmas. Can you believe that?
It's fast.
Like I didn't even think about it too. We were talking about what we're gonna do for next week, and I'm like, oh my god, that's Christmas next week.
We'll get
December
something
gone?
in. We'll get something in. All right. So long. How do I get out?
All right.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Studio. Bye.
Thanks for watching us on Pasta to Go. We'll see you next time. If I could find the hour.